Imagine yourself in a room full of men, mostly strangers, maybe one or two familiar faces. You want to let your guard down, but there's a question in your mind. Is this space truly safe? For so many of us, finding a place where we can be vulnerable without fear is incredibly difficult. Society has taught us to keep our emotions in check, to stay guarded, and to never show weakness. For gay, bi, trans, and queer men, this challenge is even greater, with fewer places where they can truly feel safe among other men. But what if there was a space where those rules didn't apply? Where letting down your guard wasn't just allowed, it was encouraged. In this episode, I'll be speaking with Cator Sparks and Mike Sagun. These men are leading the charge with retreats that create safe spaces where GBTQ men can be seen, heard, and accepted without judgment. Imagine a place where every man is encouraged to be vulnerable, where connection happens without fear or pretense. If you've ever felt that longing for a place where you can genuinely feel safe to be yourself, this episode is for you. What makes these retreats so powerful? Why do men keep coming back for more? Mike and Cator are here to break it all down for you. So let's get on the road. Welcome to the Authenticity Road podcast.
We started this podcast to share our stories and hear from others about their adventures in men's work.
Join us on the journey to our fully authentic selves, emotional healing, and the meaning of modern masculinity.
Here on Authenticity Road.
Hello, and welcome to the Authenticity Road podcast. I am Cator, and this week on the podcast, I am beyond delighted to have with me two of my favorite people on the planet, Mike Sagun and Cator Sparks. Cator and Mike are the founders and leaders of the GBTQ retreat that you will find at gbtqretreats.org. It is, as far as I know, the only real men's work retreat that does the work the way that we guys do it. But we'll get into that as we get closer, as we get further into the show. Just really quickly. So for those of you who have listened before, you are familiar with Cator. Cator is a men's coach and facilitator, who is well known for his work with queer identified men. Mike Sagun is also a men's coach and facilitator, as well as a leader of multiple retreats, and has also been a previous guest on the podcast. So guys, I'm just going to toss it over to you and let you introduce yourselves and give out any pertinent information that I have left out in my intro, anything that you want folks to know about you. Cator, why don't we start with you?
Thanks, Cator. It's so good to be with you again. And so Cator Sparks here. I'm calling from Charleston, South Carolina, but I'm moving on November 8th to Atlanta, Georgia, and I cannot wait to talk about a queer city, a thriving queer city. So cannot wait to be back in the mix. I was born and raised there, so it's great to come home. And so I've been doing this for about 6 years, and I love this work. It's really profound. And it's even better when you get to work with other people you love, like you and Mike. So I'm thrilled to be here.
Awesome. Hey, Mike, how about you?
Hi, I'm Mike Sagun. I am a certified professional coactive coach, just like Cator is. We both went to the same coaching school, coactive coaching. I'm also a somatic experiencing practitioner, and I work primarily with men. And the work that I do with men often deals with trauma and stress and overwhelm. And although I am queer identified, gay identified, I work with both queer and straight men. And I've worked with organizations like Everyman. That's how I know these guys. And then also MELD, Men's Emotional Leadership Development.
Awesome. Thanks for that. So in the, for full disclosure, so that this is not a surprise to anyone listening, I have actually facilitated with these guys at their most recent GBTQ retreat. So when I say, if I say we, or when this happened, or I make reference to something, you'll know that I was there and I was a part of the team and thrilled to be that.
And you will continue to be part of the team.
And I will continue to be part of the team. Yay. And again, in full disclosure, part of the reason that I was really excited to have these guys come on the show and to share their experience and their vision and all of that is that we have another one planned for 2025. And as well attended as the 2024 one was, we would love to see even more queer identified men have access to this kind of in-person experience, doing this kind of work. And so I'm just really, really fired up and excited, not just to be a part of their team, but also to share this with all of you guys out there listening. So I think one of the places I would love to start is, because this is something that I don't even know, even having been part of the team, is how this all started. Like, how did you guys decide to do this, to start?
Mike, you want to kick it off?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think the reality is, and Cator and Cator, you guys know this through experience, is that in the years that the three of us have been facilitating work like this, we tend to be one of a few, if not the only, openly gay and queer men in these spaces. And we would have retreats all over the United States, from the West Coast to the East Coast, that sometimes would have 40 to 65, 70 guys, and we would be one of a few queer men that were openly gay. And it's the unfortunate reality that many men's workspaces are primarily occupied by cisgendered straight men, which I love, because all men need this space, but it creates a different dynamic for queer men, because for many of us queer men, cisgendered straight men were our bullies growing up. And so although that can bring up a huge piece of work during a retreat, which I think can be really powerful for queer men, but also be powerful for straight men. I've seen it. Mm-hmm. I've seen it firsthand, how powerful that dynamic can be. It also makes it less accessible for queer men who don't have the capacity to be in a space like that yet, who don't have the capacity or the courage or the bravery to be in a mostly straight space. And so Cator and I made it our mission to create more spaces for queer identified men to be at retreats that has nothing to do with sex or kink or drinking or partying, that has primarily everything to do with emotional healing and somatic healing. And we'll talk about somatics in a bit, but primarily a space focused on our healing as individuals and also as queer men with other queer men.
Well said.
Yeah, definitely well said. Cator, anything you want to add? I think you've been practicing. Cator, anything you would add to that?
Yeah, no, I think what Mike said at the end was what really I wanted to share too, is so many men come up to me and say, hey, is there sex? Is there plant medicine? Is there alcohol? Is there nudity? And I'm like, nope. And either like, oh, or they're like, oh, thank God, because guys, so many retreats are plant medicine based, or there's some kink and sex in there, which is great if that's where you're at. But we really do want to do some deep healing and go inside, go into you, where you can connect to yourself and connect to these other men in a really organic way, because gay men, surprise, so much is surrounded about sex. And so to have a place where we can turn that off, and there's no sexual weird energy, and does he like me, and is he going to sleep with him or me? Nope. It's all about like, we're all healing together. And I think that's been a really powerful part of our process.
Yeah. And I think any men's healing, and so this goes for all you straight guys that are listening to this too, is non-sexual intimacy and non-sexual affection, and how sharing that kind of energy between or with you and another man is really powerful and healing. And it also, when we remove the sex out of a space like that, just like what Cator is saying, there is just no pressure and there is no thoughts of like, is this person coming on to me? Rather, it's just a space of, this is actually non-sexual, platonic intimacy, touch.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm glad you kind of brought this up. I was actually going to get there later, but I'm glad we're doing it now. Because one of the questions I was going to ask you was, what are some of the misconceptions that people, gay and straight, might have about a gay men's retreat? And to me, I think that one of the primary misconceptions was that it was a weekend sex party. That it was going to be sort of nonstop cruise-a-thon with people hooking up between exercises, between meetings and things like that. And that it's important to get the message out there, and it's important to get the understanding out there for everyone, but especially the guys who are considering, gay guys who might be considering joining something like this, that it's not going to be pressurized. There's not going to be an expectation, because probably giving away too much of myself here. But so for some gay guys, the promise of a weekend of nonstop sex would be a plus. For some guys like me, the promise of a weekend of nonstop sex would be get me as far the hell away from there as you possibly can. I don't want anything to do with that. Not because I'm not sex positive, but because there's so much pain and sadness and anger and grief wrapped up in my relationship to how do I approach sex with men that I've never met before, right? And so, that soul-killing thing that happens when I go out cruising, or I should say when I used to go out cruising. I've been married for, we've been together for 28 years. But, I remember that feeling, that soul-killing feeling of, I'm not attractive. I'm not good enough. You're not going to want me. Do you want me? Do I want you? What's this going to be? Who's going to take who's going to be active, right? And just, can we just not do that for 72 hours? I kind of went a little sort of off the beaten path there, but I think you know what I'm getting at. And I think it's important for guys to understand that if you come to this, you're coming to commit to doing a weekend of your personal work, and that sex is not going to be part of the equation unless sex is part of your work, in which case you're going to deal with that. You're going to look at that. But you're not going to be having sex with the other men at the retreat.
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point there, which is this is a GBTQ, queer, bi, trans, gay retreat. And so naturally there's going to be attraction, and there can be attraction, and there can be sexual attraction. Yeah. And naturally what I've seen is when we dive deep into our emotions and we open up and we become intimate with each other, that increases our sexual attraction with people. It happens, right? Many of us want to have an emotional connection with a sexual connection as well. That's really important to our bodies. It's really important to our nervous systems. And so I think naturally that's going to happen. And we have clear boundaries and very clear agreement around what that looks like. And because consent is a huge thing at our retreat. Even the consent to hug someone, having the consent to touch someone, we really hone that in at the beginning of the retreat so that everyone is on the same page. Cator, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I also want to add, just because we're not having sex doesn't mean we're not having fun. This is not a crying queers 72-hour retreat. There is definitely crime, but there's also lots of joy. There's lots of fun. And I can't tell you what that means to me personally and the community that we're with, is I'm having fun with 12, 15, 20 other gay men and there's no sex involved. This is awesome. I never get to have this kind of connection with other queer men. And so, I just love that about these retreats.
Yeah, I mean, it's like a common word in our culture is the word play, which often means we're gonna play with someone, which means sexual play, right? I'm playing around,
Right?
And we play, but it's non-sexual play.
Yeah. And I'm not going to give away anybody's individual experience from the last retreat that we did, but it's my belief that some guys might not have known, despite all of the prep work done in advance, explaining what the weekend was going to be like and all of that. I think that some guys were surprised at the depth and intensity of the work. We're not necessarily prepared for that, and we're expecting something more akin to like a weekend cruise to nowhere, where, you have a bunch of gay guys on a boat and you're just all sort of communing. I think there might have been an expectation that this was going to be more of a, let's sit around the campfire, strumming a guitar and singing Kumbaya and talking about our feelings, rather than diving as deep as we did into what people's experiences are, what their emotional and somatic experiences are. I mean, does that kind of go along with how you feel things go?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think, you brought up one of the important parts of our retreat is the somatic part, which, one thing I said, I'm tickling myself because I want to talk about tools, but not in a queer way. But we thank you for laughing. But we want to give our guys tools to use going forward in their life, so they don't just come to this and then they're dumped out into the real world and be like, how do I do this? Like, this is a place where we want them to learn how to regulate their body, learn how to take care of their emotions, learn how to ground themselves, learn how to be authentic and vulnerable. And so, it's not just kumbaya around the fire, which it can be at some points, but it actually is a place where you're going to leave this retreat with a better understanding of how to live in an everyday normal world that might be overwhelming.
And I also think we want to provide a space where guys can really practice what it's like to be an emotional embodied person, practice what it's like to be emotionally embodied with other people in community. And that takes a lot of practice. I would say across the board, gay or straight, queer or straight, men have a hard time connecting on a deep level. Men have a hard time sitting with their feelings and really sharing how they feel, but also men have a hard time receiving what other people feel. Men have a hard time seeing emotion and not finding ways to fix the problem and just allowing it to be. And so what we're doing at GBTQ retreats is we're training men how to be with their emotions, how to sit with their emotions, but also how to receive others' emotions, not take it personal, and not have to go into fixer mode. And I think that's really important in our development. There aren't that many spaces that are created primarily for just this emotional embodiment piece. And the somatic piece is really important here. It's because I also find that in many men's workspaces, it's very heady and intellectual. It's very abstract. We talk about archetypes and these different hierarchical roles. And that's not the work that we're primarily invested in. The work that we're primarily invested in is our nervous systems. and how our nervous systems interact with each other, but also how our nervous systems can really play an integral role in our health, in either regulating our emotions or in getting ourselves into a mobilization to fight or flight. And so we're really teaching guys, and we're teaching their nervous systems how to regulate, how to connect, how to find safety, in a really curated and crafted and well-intentioned way.
You hit on something, and this is sort of to the left of what you hit on, but I'm going to go there anyway. And that is that doing this in a queer space, in a queer occupied space, can be easier for some guys, and it can be more challenging for some guys. So I'm going to explain what I mean by that by using myself as an example. So earlier in my life, cisgender straight men were the enemy. They were unsafe. They were the bullies. They were the people who hurt me, all of that. At some point in my life, in my 20s and into my 30s, that shifted. And my good friends became, my best male friends were straight men. And the people who I felt like were the hurting people, the harming people, were the gay men in my life. And they felt unsafe. And so I felt safer around straight guys than I did around queer identified men. So when I first came to these men's workspaces, I was much more comfortable around the straight guys I met than I was around the few gay guys that I met in these spaces. And so had I come to this retreat at the beginning of my men's work journey, I would have found this incredibly challenging instead of comforting. And I'm curious if you think that any of the guys who have been to your queer focused retreats have had that experience where they've come and thought, okay, this is going to be ultra challenging because gay men feel unsafe to me.
Yeah, I mean, totally. I mean, there's a spectrum of experiences, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just like, our experience as gay men is going to be different from everyone else's, and who we connect and relate to is going to be different from everyone else's. And I think there are participants who I am thinking of in particular who are gay men who came out later in their life, mm-hmm. who had lived straight lives, who some of them were married, some of them have kids, and had lived this entirely different life until later in their life where they decided to courageously come out. And they have the experience of being in a space like this and being like, whoa, like I've never really spent this much time with gay men in my life, right? And I think we have people of the opposite end who primarily hang out with queer people, who only find comfort and safety with queer people. And so I think, wherever your experience is, it's completely valid. And I think what you were getting to there, Ettore, is that like whatever is coming up for you at the retreat or whatever your intention is at the retreat, we're going to find ways to help you be with it and sit with it, and maybe not necessarily fix the problem because we're not there to fix, but help you develop a new relationship, with whatever that work is. So if your work is being with more queer men, or your work is with feeling more comfortable with straight people, that's going to come up at a retreat, and we're going to help you develop a deeper relationship with it that feels healthy.
How do you think that the core principles of operating a retreat like this differ when the audience is queer identified men versus the audience is every guy in the world? Are there different principles at work here that we apply?
I don't really think so. From all the work that I've been doing for so long with all men, like Mike, many of my clients are straight as well. We all have that same shame. we all are going through the same thing. And that is the beauty of being in a group of straight men that, I mean, yes, like you, I was bullied by straight white men my whole life. So that was my whole high school, still bullied by straight white men in politics, so being in a room of straight white men, mostly straight white men, yeah, it was a place for me to really see oh wow, they're going through shit too, and oh wow, look at him being vulnerable. Like he looks like someone who'd beat me up. So being in a queer space where we always still have these, well, oh, he's prettier than I am, or oh, well, is he going to find me attractive? And that's taken away, but you still have these feelings, don't we? When we first set eyes on this group of 20 guys we're going to be spending, 72 hours with, what's it going to feel like? And so, besides that part about sex that, probably not going to happen at a straight retreat, it is really still the basic principles that we've been doing for so long of connecting to the body, going deeper, processing that shame, finding tools in how to live in a daily life authentically and vulnerably. Which is a beautiful thing for queer people to realize, is that we're not that different than these straight men. We have heard, all of us have heard those many men talking about how they never felt like their father loved them, and that's across the spectrum, being bullied at school. So I think that is a really beautiful thing that if we can all get to that same space of, hey, we're on the same boat here. We're all wanting to grow and to deepen our love for ourselves and each other. Yeah. Anything to say about that, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, I think at one point in all of our lives, we've all been othered by someone, and we've all been made to feel like we don't belong. Unfortunately for queer people, we've seen that in our politics and in legislation. And so that's where it becomes different. That's where the difference, where the government really does control how we can find our own happiness and our own safety. So that's a different experience, right? When you have a whole system that is played against you, it's a different experience than being a straight guy that doesn't have to worry about holding their partner's hand in public, or attending or being at a bar, right? Or walking down the street. Like straight men just don't have that kind of experience, right? And so I want to honor that. But as far as the emotional part of feeling othered and feeling ashamed and feeling sad and grief, yeah, I mean, across the board, we can all relate to that. We can all relate to the similarities of what it feels like to not feel like we are accepted because of our emotions.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that is often present for me at retreats is, as an openly gay man, when I go to hug a straight guy, I don't do this so much anymore, but it used to be a big thing for me that as I would go in for the hug, I would play this little game in my head of, does he think that I'm trying to have physical contact with him? Does he think that I have ulterior motives here by going in for the hug? Right? And that doesn't happen so much anymore. But at a gay retreat, at a GBTQ retreat, that comes up again. Or it can come up again with, as I reach in for the hug, is the guy going, hey, is he trying to hug me because he's attracted to me? Or as you go in for the hug, is he looking at you and saying, can I get through this hug because I'm attracted to him hugging me? And so there's this weird sort of chemistry dynamic thing going on. And I'm curious, is that just a game that went on in my head, or is that something that like everyone either experiences or has experienced?
I think it's human nature to have that feeling, right? I mean, it comes up for me often, and and that's why we're there, isn't it? To push through some of that. And to see if the guy backs away like, what's this work that he has to do? And what's my work not to be offended by it?
Right.
Yeah, and honestly, I don't know if that's a unique experience to queer men, right? I think straight men think that about hugging straight men, right? I think straight men are afraid of that, of hugging other straight men, right? Like if I put my hand on this guy's shoulder as he's feeling his emotion, is he going to think that I'm coming onto him or I'm flirting with him? Right. And I think this is where we verge on, or I guess we have to shift the culture of male intimacy, right? We have to shift what it's like here in Mexico. It's very common for me to kiss my straight male friends, sometimes on the lips, but most of the time on the cheek. And it's not even a thing. It's not a thing at all. It's not uncommon for me here in Mexico or in other Spanish countries for me to put my arm around another man and just have my arm there in a non-sexual way. It's very accepted. There are different cultures out there that are very handsy with each other. And same-sex handsiness, right? Same-sex intimacy that is non-sexual. And I don't think it's a uniquely American thing where there's just a little bit of that like pause of like, what signal am I sending or what signal are they sending me? And I don't think it's a very unique queer thing. I think many men of all spectrums of sexuality think that. I think this is, what's interesting about that is like, there's almost like this predatory sense underneath it. Like, am I now being a predator here? Or is this person being a predator to me? And in some ways, that can be a very similar experience to female-identified, female-bodied people, females, where females like think about that quite often, right? I was, it was actually at one of the retreats that the three of us were leading, where a topic of one of the straight guys at the retreat, he was just a participant. He was like, I've been to a gay bar and I felt all the eyes on me and I felt really uncomfortable, like they could smell my straightness. And I was like, great, now you know what it feels like to be a woman at a bar. Right. And it like blew him away. He was like, oh my God, yes, you're right. Like, that's what it feels like. Right. And like, there is this like hypervigilance of being, am I a predator here or am I not a predator here? And I'm not saying that that's bad. I think we have to be aware of those kinds of things. I think we have to bring that into our awareness, but that's also the kinds of things that we have to start to dissolve, because I really do believe that intimacy, either between opposite sexes or opposite sexualities, whatever it is, I think it's completely needed. And non-sexual intimacy is needed in all relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the moments that I remember from our retreat was trying to introduce safe touch, trying to sort of introduce kind of, can you embrace, can you cuddle in a non-sexual way, just as a way to have safe touch. And how hard that was, the level of resistance that there was to going there, which frankly surprised me. I thought that this would be something that maybe I was naive to assume that gay men were freer with their personal space or their bodies than straight men were. And so I was a little surprised at the level of resistance that I saw in how do we engage together in safe touch. And I think part of that was that it was maybe, it was not introduced far enough in advance, as we were all workshopping that. But part of it also, I think, was just that I was bringing my suppositions about how gay men treat their personal space and their bodies, as opposed to how straight men do. I don't know. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like at some of the retreats we've all been at with mostly straight men, everyone's touching each other because it's such a loving connection, and there's no fear. there,
Right.
right? If you're in that vulnerable space as a bunch of straight men, with us too, there's a lot of hands around each other and a lot of hugging and it's a really, really beautiful thing to see. But in our world, in the GBTQ queer world, like we're so protected because we're always used to being, oh, what's that, with touching. And even in a really vulnerable space, like maybe you've been too vulnerable and been taken advantage of in the past. So I think there's a lot of there's a lot of walls there for queer men to go into a consensual cuddle puddle, as we called it, and that's why we do it, is to break down those walls and to find a space to feel safe and be able to put your arm around another queer man, and it's not romantic, it's not sexual, it is a brotherhood.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think what I find very common in the gay world is that we're oftentimes objectified, and we can feel that. And sometimes touch becomes this, like, you are objectifying me, like you are using me for some of your, like, for a sexual need that you have, a sexual desire that you have. And I think what this really comes down to is our lack of safety within our own culture, within our own people. I think, if we had a few more days together and we knew each other on a deeper level and we can relate a little bit more, I think we would have had an easier time, because I facilitate it's actually a mixed retreat, but we're all queer facilitators. It's Wild Heart Men's Breathwork Retreat in Mendocino at Spirit Camp. And the four of us facilitators are super cuddly with each other. We're very like, okay. And we do these like exercises that feel like, oh, okay, this is kind of, it's risky here, but we're also very queer and very like, okay. And we know each other. We are introducing intimacy to a group of basically strangers. And I think that's hard. I think it's really difficult. And to Cator's point, and I think this is why we do it. We do it because it is difficult, because it's risky. And to remove the objectification of it, to remove the sex away from it, feels new and it feels foreign. And I think that's what makes it a bit difficult, is the foreignness of it all.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And as you were talking, I kept thinking, am I predator or am I prey? Right. Yeah. We brushed up against this sort of kind of briefly here, just in that segment, but I'm going to kind of take it a little further. How do you, because one of the things that I recall from when I was working with you was that we had a very structured outline that we followed. From 8 to 8:15, we're going to do this. And then from 8:15 to 8:30, we're going to do that, and whatever. How do you structure that? How do you do that? Like, what's the thought process that goes into, how do I organize this in a way that feels like flow?
Yeah. I mean, I have a background in education. And so what's really important in teaching students is the scaffolding aspect of it, right? To figure out, what do we want our students to walk away with at the end of the retreat? And so from my perspective, the way that I like to structure and organize a retreat is I like to work backwards, right? So Cator and I have had meetings of, what do we want these guys to walk away with? Sunday afternoon, what are they feeling? How are they behaving? How are they speaking to each other? How are they talking? And then how do we get there? And at our retreats, we like to have just a balanced level of activation and deactivation. So basically what that means is providing exercises and scenarios where we have our participants take some risks. And that could just be as simple as sharing something very intimate, something risky, or making eye contact with someone. And then we expand on that and we kind of go deeper, but we just do enough to hold the tension, and then we do something to release it. And we bring them back down to a place where they can connect with themselves. And it's like this very beautiful dance of activating and deactivating, activating and deactivating. And it's through this process that guys get to be in their bodies, but also, I think ultimately get to where we want them to be at the end of the retreat, which is oftentimes we want them hugging and not wanting to leave. And that's what often happens is guys are hugging and saying, wow, this went by so fast. How can we do more of this?
And that's why our next retreat is going to be 4 days and not 3, because so many men have asked for more. And I think that's a great way, to Mike's point of the way you scale this is, so we don't have to cram so much into one day that it's sensory overload for the guys, that we can space it out as well with the relaxing time, with the hiking time, with the downtime. And they get to know each other even better and for longer. This retreat's over Easter Passover weekend, which was kind of a risk for us. But we did a poll, and so many queer people were like, we don't either have family to go to, or this is a great excuse not to go to family. Happy to come to a retreat on Easter Passover weekend. And we have the day off. People get the Friday and Monday off. So,
right. When you told me it was going to be over Easter weekend, I was like, great. Now I know what I'm doing for Easter, because I didn't have any plans otherwise. One of the things, as you were talking there about, constructing that with, creating attention and then creating a release and all of that, one of the things that came up for me was we're not just facilitators often there. We're also participants in a way. One of the things that I remember that still, like if I start talking about it too much, it's going to make me start crying, was the exercise that we did where we stood in a circle and, if this sentence describes you, step in. If this sentence describes you, whatever. And I was a wreck when we were doing that exercise. Like, every time you read a statement that was me, like, it compounded for me. It wasn't like, oh, I did this and then I did that. It was like, I did this and I am that and I am that. And it just got heavier and heavier and heavier. And even though I was technically one of the guardrails, I was one of the safeties for the other men, I was also deeply impacted by that. And so in a way, we're not just facilitators, we're also participants. I mean, has that been your experience as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really important part of the work, right? I think I think with any person that leads this kind of work, it's imperative that they do deep healing work on their own to be able to hold the space for others. I honestly don't trust any other people who have never done a therapy session or a coaching session, who have never gone to a retreat, right? Like I don't want to put myself in their hands, because if you haven't gone through the depths of your own healing and through the depths of your own darkness, how can you hold that for anyone else? And I think it's powerful, because I think what you're saying too, Ettore, is that like, we have to be one, yes, we're holding the guardrails. Yes, we're creating the space, but we also have to be invested in the space. Mm-hmm. And being invested in the space doesn't mean that we're robots and we're cold, but being invested in the space means that we're actually feeling, because that acts as a role model and as an example of what it's like to be a leader in this. That's emotional leadership. Emotional leadership is being able to hop in this and being like, I can have all of these huge feelings and be okay.
Right.
I could share this deep feeling. I could share this deep shame or anger or sadness, and I'm okay. And we need role models like that. Many of us didn't have role models, of emotional role models like that. Yeah. Right. We had different role models where people would get into these emotions and dysregulate and dissociate. And we need people who can be in these emotions and stay connected to themselves. And we all were. I mean, all of us were in tears, right? Yeah. That exercise is powerful. And all of us are in tears, and all of us are still so connected with ourselves and with our group. And I think that's an imperative experience, right? Yeah. I would say, like, go to other retreats and experience it. Go experience other leaders. But my thing is if you can't feel your leader, then I think there's a red flag there. Mm-hmm. If there's a part of you that goes, oh, there's something in me that says I can't feel this person, or I don't feel connected to this person, I think there might be a red flag there. And I think we might need to step back right? Because there could be emotional or spiritual bypassing that's happening with that leader. And we see that a lot, unfortunately, in our space. And so what I would say is like, Cator and I do these events, and we do this, like one of our events is Queer Coffee Hour, right? And come to our event, come to Queer Coffee Hour and come and see us. Like, come check us out and feel us. One of the reasons why we have, discovery calls for guys who are interested in our retreats is most of these guys are coming in because they're very curious and they want to go to the retreat, but partly is because they want to see if we're real, if we're the real deal, and they want to connect with us. And so come to one of our events, schedule a call with us and feel us and see if your nervous system feels regulated and safe with us to do this kind of work.
And I drink coffee. How come I've never heard of Queer Coffee Hour before? This is news to me now.
Come tomorrow.
9 a.m. tomorrow. We're going to have many of them. So we'll send it to you on Instagram.
How about that? Cator, anything to add to that, to what Mike just said? Or
no, I mean, I think it's, a similar vein of it's healthy to see the facilitators cry. You want to see them that they're feeling this, they're processing this as well. That makes it that when I was new to all this and I would see facilitators break down, like, wow, that showed me they're really connected to this work too.
Yeah. Obviously, we want guys to experience this because it's such an amazing experience. I mean, as much as I want every guy out there to experience a retreat, I really, really want GBTQ men to experience one of these retreats. Because when I think about if I had had access to this when I was in my 20s or my 30s, like everything would have been different for me. Mm-hmm. Like the fact that I didn't get to experience this until I was in my 50s, to me is, I mean, it's amazing and I'm grateful and all of that, but it's also a crime. It makes me sad that like there were decades that I suffered when I didn't have to, because if I had only known that this community was out there. On the one hand. On the other hand, I wonder if this community really was out there during those years. I think maybe it didn't exist until a lot more recently. But when you think about the way that guys benefit from these retreats, what would you tell guys are the reasons to attend? Why would you say, yes, take a risk, take a chance, come do this? Cator, I'll start with you.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think the first thing is, which I hear at every GBTQ, I host a GBTQ dig at Everyman. And from any place I go, I always hear gay men saying, I'm just looking for community. I'm just looking for community. These guys can live in Saskatchewan, they can live in Manhattan, they can live in Boise. Like, no matter where you are, and you think, oh, well, it'd be different in LA or different in San Francisco or different. And maybe if you like, I'm hoping in Atlanta, I can start curating like a group of queer people that I can connect with deeper. But overall, it's really hard. And so this is a great space to start meeting people who are not just into RuPaul's Drag Race, which I love, but also who want to do that work and who you could call and say, hey, brother, I'm having a really bad day, or, oh my God, Miss Thing, like I just got engaged, whatever, and to really connect with these guys in a deeper way. And queer men are looking for that ravenously. And so I'm hoping men will come to these. And then that way, there were a couple of guys that were completely opposites at our last retreat who ended up going to a dance party together in Manhattan, afterwards, because they totally bonded on this retreat. So that's what we want to see here. That's one of the most important things for me. How about you, Mike?
Yeah. I think for me, if you're feeling stressed or overwhelmed or burnt out, and you want to learn some tools and some innate tools that we have already in our body, it's not purchasing, a foam roller, it's not purchasing a different massage tool or a breathwork practice. Come check us out, because we are really teaching guys how to feel relief and calm in their body. yeah, there's going to be breathwork practices and meditation practices and yoga practices, but there's something really beautiful to Cator's point around our bodies feeling safe and connected with other bodies. Our bodies naturally will feel calm with other calm bodies. And so if that's something that you and your body are craving, come to our retreat, because we're creating the space for that to happen.
Yeah, definitely. Traditionally on the show, I ask the guests two questions. The first being, what does authenticity mean to you? And you guys have already answered that question, so I'm not going to ask you that again. But my other standard question, which I stand by, and which never gets old, is, as we are coming to the end of our time together, what is it that I didn't ask you, or what topic did I not bring up that you really wish that I had? Or a question that I didn't ask you that you wish I had asked you? What comes up when I say that?
Are you a top or bottom?
Or side.
Or side.
Work.
Just kidding. Just kidding.
Hilarious.
I know what I would love for you to ask is, tell me more about Easton Mountain, where we host our retreat. Because when we went there last time, like, it brings tears to my eyes. Because again, queer people don't. What is the number one space queer people have? A bar,
Right?
You know. And Easton Mountain, I don't remember how big it is, but 200 acres of wildlife that is queer owned. That, you know, is often
only used for queer activities.
Only
as
queer
well.
activities, radical fairy events, nudist events. And there's a cemetery, you know, for queer elders. I mean, it's been there since it was started, you know, to bring joy during the AIDS crisis. So it's a really powerful, sacred place to have a retreat. Truly where we all feel safe. Like, there's no place I feel safer than Easton Mountain. If something's happening, I'm going to get in my car and drive up to Easton if I need to feel safe. And the people who run it are just wonderful, and the food is delicious, and the spaces are so cozy. So I can't rave enough about this really beautiful space. It's magical. I'm so honored that we can work with this space to do this healing work.
Yeah, magical was the word that came up for me. As you were talking, I was thinking my impression of the place was that it was simply magical, which is not generally a word in my vocabulary, but there's just no better way to describe that place. And the staff was just amazing. And I was actually surprised at how many of the staff were straight, but just loving, like so loving towards us, that like sexuality wasn't even a thing, even though it's a queer space. And hands down, the best food I have ever had at any retreat. Not that I would say that the food is the reason to go to a retreat, but honestly, this was the best food I've ever had at a retreat. I was so, I couldn't believe it. I was beside myself at how great it was. But the place is just beautiful. And I mean, the scenery, the views, the accommodations are swell. I mean, it's such a sweet, sweet place. I'm sorry, Mike, I feel like I cut you off. I feel like you were about to say something and I jumped in.
Good.
No. Okay, good. Yeah. So I'm going to turn it over to you then, Mike, with my question of, what do you wish I had asked you that I didn't ask? What didn't I bring up?
I think the immediate question that comes up is, what do I hope for men in this world? And what I hope is that, you know, regardless of your sexuality, I hope you find community, that deep, true, beautiful community, something that the three of us here on this show have really experienced with other men through the work that we do. I really hope that every single man in this world has at least one person in their life that is male identified, that looks like them, because I think that's important. I think men need other men, just like women need other women, to connect with on a really deep level.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
I think if there's one other thing that I would want to bring up, it is that even though this is a GBTQ retreat, that does not make it less than or substandard or whatever. It's not like we're lowering our standards to do a queer retreat. This is the same level of excellent facilitation and deep, intense work and emotional healing and somatic experiencing that I have experienced at any other retreat. The only difference is that this is a safe space for queer identified men. But the retreat experience itself is so much like every other retreat experience. And to me, that's a really important thing for guys to know. It's like, you're not coming to this and getting less of an experience and just hanging out with a bunch of beautiful gay men, even though that's true. You are getting an amazing experience, in some ways a perfect experience, and hanging out with a bunch of beautiful gay, bi, trans, queer men.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's one of the things that I really felt needed to get put across, and I didn't do it earlier, and so I saved it for the end. But
Beautiful.
Thank you.
How do guys find out more?
GBTQretreats.com. And we will, if you could put that in the show notes. And also, we have an Instagram, GBTQ Retreats. You can also follow Mike and I on Instagram. And like Mike mentioned earlier, we this was kind of a last minute thought like a week ago to do this queer coffee idea, just to have a time to just, whether you want to come on the retreat or just get to know us, whatever it is, just, once a month, do a queer coffee at 9 a.m. on a Saturday, move your body, learn about us, have any questions. And again, another space to connect to queer folks. It's not a bar.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, guys, I can see by the clock on the wall that our time together has ended. This ended much too quickly and much too soon. However, I just want to express my deepest gratitude for the two of you for spending the time, taking time out of your busy schedules to be here and to share this with me. The two of you are both just so beautiful and perfect to me. I just adore both of you deeply, as you know. Cator, Mike, thank you so much for being here.
Such an honor.
Thank you, brother. Yeah, thank you so much.
And with that, it is time to throw the bags back into the jalopy and head back out onto the Authenticity Road. So, on behalf of the show, I am Cator, and until we meet again, please be authentic. Goodbye, everyone. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe so you're notified when a new episode is posted.
Thanks so much for listening. We hope what you've heard will help you on the road to your personal authenticity.
Visit us at www.authenticityroad.online.